A Guten Erev Shabbos. Is there any one of us who has never heard those all-important words from our mothers, exasperating though they might have been? Don't talk with your mouth full. Yes, we probably rolled our eyes. Oh, Mom. But like probably most of the rest of the advice and guidance we received from our parents as we grew older, and hopefully a little bit wiser, we came to see that they were right. Every day after Shacharis, we learned for a minute or two of practical halacha, news for the Jews you can use. For those of you who aren't familiar with this, you're warmly invited to join us for morning services on any day of your choosing. We are a little hard-pressed these days when so many are away on holiday, so everyone's participation is more than welcome. This past week, we learned about the importance of saying a Devar Torah, however brief, at the table. This elevates eating from a mundane act that all creatures do to something holy and transcendent. We also learned some of the derech eretz of how to conduct ourselves at the dining table, which the sages say takes the place of the altar in the temple for our times. In short, it's the place where we can most readily connect to God through mindful, purposeful conduct. So it's not just our mothers who told us not to talk with our mouths full, it's also a Mishnah. In Tractate Ta'anit, Tainus, which some of us completed together a few years ago, there's recorded a conversation between Rabbi Nachman and Rabbi Yitzchak. They were eating together, and Rabbi Nachman asked Rabbi Yitzchak to say a Devar Torah. Rabbi Yitzchak answered that Rabbi Yochanan had once said that one should not talk during the meal, out of concern that someone might choke on their food if it went down the wrong pipe, as we say, if the food went into the windpipe instead of into the esophagus. At the end of the meal, Rabbi Yitzchak said fuller Dvar Torah. He said, Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, Yaakov Avinu lo meis. Jacob, our ancestor, our forefather, did not die. Rabbi Nachman challenged him, and he said, if that's the case, why does it they give him a eulogy? And why did they embalm him, as it clearly says at the end of Parshas Vayechi, our Torah portion for this week? Rabbi Yitzchak replied that Rabbi Yochanan had been explaining a verse in Jeremiah, Yirmiyah Hanavi, chapter 30, where it says, Va'ata al tira avdi Yaakov ne'um Hashem. And now, my servant Jacob, have no fear, says God. For you see that I am saving you from distant places, and your descendants from the land of captivity. And Jacob will return and be at peace and tranquil, and none will make him afraid. That's the quote from Jeremiah. Rabbi Yochanan's explanation was that since Jacob, Yaakov, was lumped together with his descendants in this verse, it shows that Jacob too is subject to the same salvation as them. The nutritionists tell us you are what you eat. If you eat wholesome, healthy foods, your body will function better. If you eat junk, your body will do less well. The rabbis tell you the same thing, you are what you eat, that the spiritual quality of your food nourishes your spirit, and what you eat becomes what you are, not just in the physical sense, but also intellectually and spiritually. And as the body takes nourishment and gains strength, same with the soul, the neshama. While the body grows and flourishes and then ultimately declines, leading to death, the same is not true with the soul. It continues gathering strength until it sustains itself even independent of the body in which it's housed, explains Rabbi Yitzchak Arama in his commentary called Akedas Yitzchak. The example he gives is this. If you have a glass of wine and you put a little water in it to top it up, fill it up to the top, the water added essentially becomes wine. But in that process, the wine loses just a little bit of its strength. Now, if you repeat this process over and over again, eventually the wine will become weaker until really you're holding a glass of water. So he says, Rabbi Yitzchak Arama says, life is a similar process. As we know, we're in the process of finding out our body's life force eventually loses its strength, loses its potency, until finally it runs out of reserves. Others make the mistake that the body and soul are one, so that when the body gives out, that's the end of the soul too. But we know better. If that were true, then humans would be in a sense, the lowest of all creatures, because we would be the only ones who toil to no end. King Solomon, Shlomo HaMelech, writes in Koheles, all man's toil is for the sake of eating, but he never fulfills his soul. Kol amal adam lefihu, v'gam hanefesh lo simale. In other words, if we believe that when life's over, it's over, we might reason that we should invest our efforts into things that seem to last longer than our bodies, like, for example, gold or silver. So when Rabbi Yochanan said in the Mishnah that Jacob did not die, Yaakov Avinu lo meis, he was giving Yaakov as an example of someone who has not forfeited their claim on eternal life. Yaakov is the example, as he was the third of the patriarchs, and as the Midrash Tanchuma writes, you're confident of your harvest not when you're plowing, not when you're planting, but only when the crop has been gathered and is ready to be taken to the storehouse. That symbolizes Yaakov, the last of the patriarchs, and it's why Jeremiah describes Israel as God's first harvest. So now the deeper meaning of not talking while you're eating becomes clearer. It turns out that Mom was right. We should be careful not to choke, and here's what that really means. The airway is likened to intellectual and spiritual sustenance, as in God infused the soul of life into Adam's nostrils. And the esophagus is all about taking in nourishment for the physical body. One is important, and the other is also important, but don't confuse them. The body endures, but only for a limited time. Even for Methuselah, how much more so for the rest of us is our time limited. The soul endures forever. And the message, do not fear, O my servant Jacob, al tira avdi Yaakov, is that even the physical part of Jacob is eternal. Jacob's other name, remember, is Yisrael, Israel. That's us. We're here for good, much to the annoyance of those who would make themselves our enemies. But that's the way it goes. The Jewish people is eternal and unconquerable, inextinguishable, as is a Jewish soul. The clearest proof you could ask for is that we're still here and still enduring against the odds, against all opposition and persecution, in complete defiance of all the laws of history. Not only our soul cannot be extinguished, even the body of the Jewish people is enduring. Even though each individual Jew experiences the normal arc of birth and growth, flourishing, decline, and death, we are truly part of something larger than ourselves. Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel, lives forever. And the idea of sanctifying part of each meal, taking a bit of the time when we focus on nourishing the body, to also nourish the soul with a Torah thought or insight, highlights this as we bring the two together. Not talking with our mouth full ensures that we don't fill up on the wrong thing, that all our acts, including the very natural, very instinctual pursuit of eating food, is also ultimately l'shem shamayim. It's for the sake of heaven. Now, we know how much attention and care is paid to the beginning of life. We treat our expecting mothers with care and caution, encourage them to rest and sleep and eat well, follow the diet and schedule that gives them the best odds for a healthy pregnancy and birth. There are prenatal classes, parenting classes, birthing classes, books, and a universe of information. Some of it's probably even helpful on the internet. We celebrate the beginning of life. The whole community rejoices in the birth and naming of a child, and rightly so. The Sedra of this Shabbos, Vayechi Yaakov lived, spoiler alert, recounts the death of Yaakov Avinu, teaching us of the intimate connection between life and death. The National Association of Chevra Kadishas always asks us to take a few minutes on this particular special and holy Shabbat, Vayechi, to focus with the same attention and care and respect to the end of physical life that we normally pay to the beginning of life. The Chevra Kadisha Association has a website dedicated to this Shabbat, appropriately named shabbosvayechi.org, where you can tap into a wealth of information and resources. It's very much worth a visit before or after Shabbat to find out about living wills, funeral pre-planning, halachic living wills, and the basis of it all, the value that we put on life and how precious life is to us. As careful and planful and respectful we are of the miracle of life when it begins, we should be no less in awe and respect of it as it draws to a close. As per usual, Judaism stands in full-scale opposition to the prevailing winds of the day, in a world which would like to imagine itself as so appreciative of life, but it ain't, as they say, necessarily so. The twin scourges of medical assistance in dying and cremation are violations and negations of everything we believe about the preciousness of life and the sanctity and respect and honor due to the body, even when its time as a vessel for the soul comes to a close. Let's just mention one of the many points this website brings up in connection to our portion of the week. Kvuras Yisrael means being buried according to Jewish law, in a dedicated Jewish burial ground among Jews. Of course, many millions of our brethren were not permitted that honor and dignity, so how much more so should we strive to make sure that every Jew gets the proper dignity and respect for burial? At the beginning of our parsha, Yaakov makes his son Joseph, take a vow that he will not bury him in Egypt. Why not? Once you're gone, right? Wrong. Not only is it important to be brought to rest among one's people, which is exactly what he asks for, Yaakov didn't even want to be temporarily buried in Egypt. The bond between body and soul that develops over a lifetime, hopefully 120 years, doesn't come to an end in an instant with death, like you flick a light switch off. It progresses in stages: 7 days of difficult separation, 30 days, finally 12 months until body and soul really part company, go their separate ways. Each of those is marked, of course, in the Jewish life cycle commemoration, appropriately. Yaakov knew this, of course, and not only did he not want to be buried in some kind of pyramid or necropolis, much more importantly, he didn't want any of this process, the 12-month process of the soul taking its leave from the body, to be connected with Egypt in any way, shape, or form. The significance of the place and how it affects the ascent of the soul and the spiritual qualities the person's gathered over their lifetime is something we've seen throughout the book of Genesis, throughout Chumash Bereshis, with the efforts of our ancestors to secure a proper and fitting burial place for the patriarchs and matriarchs of our people. As we conclude our reading of that book this week with Parshas Vayechi, and we say, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek, may we all take strength from the insights that we've found along the way in this journey over the last few months that's taken us from the first days of creation through a beautiful family reunion in Egypt, in the text, and in the world around us, from the joy of Simchas Torah to the horror and pain of an attack on Israel that has cost far too many lives. May we all help each other to find strength, to look forward, and to work for better days when peace that we know is on high is even brought down to our world here. As we always say, Oseh Shalom Bimromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu, Va'al Kol Yisrael. Amen. A good Shabbos.